The first thing that went wrong that night was the floodlight on the east wall. And the second thing was the radio. And Danny Pace remembered both of them for the rest of his life. But the third thing was the thing that changed it. Danny was 24, 11 months into his first overseas security contract, and he'd spent the early part of the evening doing exactly what the team leader told him, keeping an eye on the compound's rear courtyard, where the local hire interpreter sat at a folding table with a stack of radio logs she wasn't cleared to read but had been asked to translate anyway. "Stay back here," the team leader, a heavy-set former Marine named Russo, had told her 2 hours earlier, not unkindly. "If anyone needs something translated, you're the first call. Otherwise, just stay out of the way, all right? Things might get loud." She'd nodded once. Danny remembered that, just one nod, no argument, the kind of nod that didn't ask anything back. She was maybe 30, quiet, careful with her hands, the kind of person who folded her jacket instead of draping it, who arranged her pens in a row before she started working. Danny had pegged her the way most of the team had pegged her in the 3 weeks she'd been with them, a translator, a contract hire, someone who showed up with good paperwork and a quiet manner and stayed mostly out of everyone's way. She ate alone, mostly. She didn't ask questions about the job, once. Danny had seen her watching the men clean their weapons with an expression he'd taken for mild discomfort, the look, he'd assumed, of someone who didn't like guns. He hadn't thought about her again until the compound's east wall lit up green-white from a flare and the world fell apart. It happened fast. The perimeter trucks went first, small arms fire raking the gate, then something heavier. Then the floodlight died in a shower of sparks, and the courtyard dropped into darkness lit only by muzzle flashes. Danny heard Russo on the radio screaming for the relief team, heard the words "walls coming down" and "Bishop's hit" in the same breath, and then the radio went to static and stayed there. Danny ran for the inner courtyard, because that's where the noise was loudest, and what he found there stopped him cold for half a second that felt like a year. Bishop, their best shooter, was down against the inner wall, not moving, his rifle a few feet away where it had skidded. The breach in the outer wall, a gap the size of a doorway, blasted clean, was the only thing between the compound and whatever was coming through it, and there were maybe 40 meters of open courtyard between that breach and the 6 men left standing, all of them firing in directions that weren't doing much good in the dark. And then Danny saw her. She was already moving, not running, not crouching in panic, but walking, low and even, toward Bishop's fallen rifle, the same careful way she folded her jacket. She picked it up like she'd been carrying one her whole life. She checked the chamber with her thumb without looking at it, and then she walked toward the breach point, and dropped into a kneeling position behind a low concrete planter that gave her a clean line on the gap in the wall. "Hey!" Danny shouted because his brain hadn't caught up yet. "Get back, get back. This isn't. Cover your left flank," she said. Her voice was steady, almost bored, the way a person sounds when they're doing something they've done 1,000 times before. "I've got the breach." Russo turned, saw her kneeling there with Bishop's rifle, and for one long second looked like he was going to argue. Then the first shape came through the breach. She fired once. The shape went down in the gap, and for one strange moment everything else seemed to go quiet. Not actually quiet. The gunfire was still everywhere, but quiet in the way that the center of a storm is quiet. Danny found himself watching her instead of his own sector, and what he saw was a woman working a rifle the way Bishop worked it on his best day. Economical, no wasted movement, breathing controlled, eyes never leaving the gap. "Second shape, right side of the breach," she said, like she was reading a weather report. "Danny, that's your name, right? Your flank's clear for now. Watch the wall to your left. I've got front." He didn't even ask how she knew his name. He just did what she said. The second shape came through and went down the same way the first had. One. Round, controlled, no panic, no spray. She shifted her position 6 inches, found a new angle on the gap and waited. Russo had stopped trying to give orders and started relaying her calls to the other men instead, because hers were the only ones making the night make sense. 3 more incoming, staggered, breach and northeast corner, she said. "Northeast is yours, Russo. I've got the breach. Don't bunch up on me." A third shape, a fourth. She dropped both, the second one a harder shot. Off angle, through the gap at a steep diagonal that Danny would later learn was the kind of shot most range instructors wouldn't even set up as a qualification course. She didn't celebrate it. She just shifted again, checked her remaining rounds with a glance. Danny saw her count them, actually count them like she was managing a budget, and called out, calm as ever, "I'm running low. Someone get me Bishop's spare mag. Left vest pocket. Don't run for it. Low crawl, there's a sight line from the northeast that's still hot." It was Danny who went. He didn't think about it. Body just went hits. Flat on his stomach across 10 feet of open ground that felt like a mile. And when he got back to her position and pressed the magazine into her hand, she said without looking at him, "Good. Stay here. You're my left now." And that was it. No thanks, no acknowledgement beyond putting him to work. And somehow that was exactly the right thing to say, because it gave him something to do besides be afraid. The fifth wave came through harder. 3 shapes at once, fast, and for the first time Danny heard something in her breathing change. Not panic, just the sound of someone working harder. She took the center shape first, then the left, and the third one got close enough that Danny, lying beside her, could see it clearly in the muzzle flashlight. Before she put it down with a shot that was close enough, that he felt the heat of the rifle against his shoulder. "Reloading," she said. "Hold the gap for me. Just hold it. Don't shoot unless something's actually through." For 3 seconds, 3 of the longest seconds Danny had ever experienced, he held a rifle on an empty doorway-sized hole in a wall, alone, while the woman everyone had called, just the translator, 2 hours earlier, reloaded beside him, with hands that weren't shaking at all. Then she was back, and the gap stayed empty, and somewhere behind them, faintly, through the chaos, Danny heard the sound he'd been praying for. Rotors, the relief force. Coming in low and fast, lights cutting through the smoke. The compound didn't fall. The breach held. By the time the relief force's lead vehicle rolled through the gate, the courtyard had gone from a battlefield to something stranger. A kind of stunned, ringing quiet, 6 men still on their feet, Bishop conscious again and being loaded onto a stretcher, and one woman in civilian clothes sitting calmly against the concrete planter, methodically clearing and safing the rifle in her lap like she was closing out a shift. The relief force's senior NCO, a grizzled army sergeant, first class named Doyle, swept the courtyard with the kind of look men get when they're doing a body count and trying not to let it show. He counted 6 men standing, 1 wounded but alive, and then his eyes landed on the woman with the rifle, and he stopped. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he said slowly, "Foxglove?" She looked up. For the first time all night, something in her face changed. Not surprise, exactly. Recognition. The look of someone hearing a name they hadn't used in a long time. "It's been a while, Sergeant," she said. Doyle's mouth opened and closed once before anything came out. "I trained under you, 8 years ago. You were the only one in the battalion who ever made me qualify expert on the move." He turned to Russo, to the rest of the team, to Danny. All of them staring now, putting pieces together that suddenly, obviously, fit. "You people had her translating paperwork in the back room?" She was the youngest woman ever to qualify as a designated marksman in our brigade. She ran the advanced shooting package for 3 years before she got out. Russo looked at the rifle in her hands, then at the breach in the wall, at the precise, evenly spaced shapes still visible in the gap, the kind of placement that didn't happen by accident, and something in his face shifted from disbelief to something quieter. He walked over, and for a moment Danny thought he was going to say something about the chain of command, about how this had happened, about a dozen things that suddenly didn't matter. Instead, Russo came to attention and saluted her. Just like that, no ceremony, no announcement. Just a tired, dust-covered man in body armor, putting his hand to his brow in the wreckage of a courtyard, in front of the relief force, in front of his own team. "Ma'am," he said, "I had you in the back room. You had 6 men to keep alive in a wall coming down," she said. And there was no edge to it at all. Just plain fact, the same tone she'd used to call the breach all night. "You did what you thought was right with the information you had. I'm not interested in being saluted for doing my job, Russo. Put your hand down." He didn't, not right away. Neither did Doyle. And slowly, one by one, the other men, Bishop, propped up on the stretcher, lifting his good arm in a half salute he couldn't quite finish. The others, exhausted, filthy, alive, followed, until Danny realized he was the only one not standing at some kind of attention in a courtyard that 2 hours ago he'd thought he understood completely. He raised his hand too. She let out a breath, and for just a moment, something in her composure, not cracking, never cracking, but softening, showed through. She looked around at all of them, at the wall still standing, at Bishop alive on the stretcher. at the relief force's lights washing the courtyard gold, she said quietly. Please, we've got 6 men to get home. Later, on the flight out, Danny sat across from her, and for a long time neither of them said anything. Finally, he said, I told you to stay back. I told you it might get loud. I know, she said, and there was something almost gentle in it. You were doing your job too. How'd you end up? He started and didn't quite know how to finish it. Translating paperwork, sitting in the back room, folding her jacket. She thought about it for a moment, looking out at the dark moving below them. Sometimes, she said, the work that needs doing isn't the work people expect you to be good at. I didn't come here to be a shooter again. I came here because I speak the language, and because there were people who needed someone to talk to who wouldn't be afraid of them. She glanced at the rifle case at her feet, the one Doyle had insisted she keep. Tonight just turned out to need both. Danny didn't say anything else for a while. He just sat there, watching her, the same careful stillness she'd had at the folding table hours. Earlier, the same quiet, the same hands that, less than an hour ago, had held a wall against an entire night. He thought about the look he'd seen on her face that first week, watching the men clean their weapons, the look he'd taken for discomfort. He understood now it had been something else entirely, recognition maybe, or patience, the look of someone who knew exactly what those weapons were for, and had simply chosen, for now, to put that part of herself away. He thought about Russo's salute and about how long it had taken all of them, every single one of them, himself included, to see what had been sitting in the back room the whole time, arranging her pens in a row, eating alone, asking no questions, ready the entire time without anyone knowing it. And he made himself a promise, the kind of promise 24-year-olds make, and sometimes actually keep, that he was never again going to assume he knew what someone was capable of just because of where they'd been told to sit, or how quietly they sat there. The plane droned on through the dark, carrying 6 men home, and one woman who had quietly, calmly, without raising her voice once, made sure of it.